X-Files was a ring. No, wait. It was a dragon ring. Burninating the countryside. Burninating all the peasants. Greetings, Internet. DDA here, and there's something that I think is pretty big that most of the other content creators are missing in their Firewall and Meteor builds that I've been seeing released. Now, everything I'm about to say is meant to be constructive criticism. Of course, no one really knows what is best in the season yet because nothing is released yet. All of this is just theory crafting, and every build that has been released, I am sure, including this one, is not optimized. Time will tell through testing what are the best versions of this build. However, I think there's a glaring weakness that all of the Firewall and Meteor builds I've seen online are missing. I spent the last month of Season 2 perfecting a Meteor build in Abattoir of Zir. And I went through several iterations, and one of those iterations included a Firewall Meteor build that also used the Meteor enchantment. Now, something I noticed while I was testing this out was the Meteor enchantment has an abysmal proc rate. It is only 10%. It was actually so low that it would never proc at all. While I was running through the dungeon, it procced at such a low rate that I ended up removing it, even though that it was such a lucky hit driven build. Like, I see the guides online, they're getting to about 80 or 90% plus additive lucky hit chance, and I was around there too with my build, and even with that high level of lucky hit, it just simply doesn't proc that much because you're always going to be limited. It's always multiplied by that 10% chance, and no amount of lucky hit that we can stack can really affect that. So it's always going to be like pulled down by that 10%. Now, something I think that the other builds are missing is the fact that Firewall is not good at proccing lucky hit. Pretty much the only way that you can get it to proc lucky hits is by stacking a bunch of them. And testing these builds against the target dummies that have 5 mobs in perfect formation, that are standing stationary, that are just sitting there and allowing you to attack them and build up stacks with their infinite HP really give us an inflated idea of how many procs that we're going to see. The real world application of this build, you're going to be moving around a lot. You're not going to be able to stack 12 firewalls and 12 meteors on top of them. It's just not going to happen. So if you think about using X-Falls requires you to have a burning effect to proc it. And the one unique characteristic of all burning effects, if you watched my burning lucky hit video, is that the lucky hit chance of all burning attacks like Firewall, Meteor, Firebolt enchantment, all of them are evenly spread throughout the duration of the fire effect. This makes the individual procs really low for all burning effects. So X-Falls, it forces you to use burning. So there's no real way around that. If we want to use X-Falls, we have to use burning effects. And the same is true for the Firewall enchantment, right? So if you're going to have a Firewall focused build and you want to use the Firewall enchantment, the same is true. So it makes sense that they're kind of married together, right? So if you're using X-Falls, it makes sense to want to use the Firewall enchantment because both of them trigger off of burning effects. Now, the Meteor enchantment is unique because it doesn't have to be a burning effect. This means that Firewall is not the best at proccing Meteor enchantment. This means that Meteor is probably not the best at proccing the Meteor enchantment itself. Because again, these lucky hit chances are spread throughout the time. So it takes you 6 to 12 seconds to get that full amount of the lucky hit. Are the mobs living that long? I would hope not. So what is the best skill to trigger the Meteor enchantment? Well, it would be a skill that all of the lucky hit is front loaded, where in 1 second you have an incredibly high lucky hit chance. Either that, or it would be a skill that you can stack a ton of either of the Firebolt enchantment or a ton of burning effects very, very quickly. And with the low proc rate of Meteor enchantment and the fairly low proc rate of the Firewall enchantment, I do not see that quick stacking happening. Fire Bolt enchantment can do it with things like charge bolts and ball lightning, things that hit very quickly, and even Hydra. But a skill that has the highest lucky hit, that's front loaded, meaning just all the lucky hit is just the first hit of the skill, 1 second, bam, you hit all the lucky hit. That may be Fireball. Fireball has an incredibly high lucky hit chance. If we just take a look at these skills, right? Like Incinerate, that's 8% lucky hit per second, right? People notice the large lucky hit percent chance of Flame Shield. Like if you've ever activated Flame Shield and ran into mobs, you'll see a lot of lucky hit triggers. That is because you're causing damage around you per second. So this lucky hit chance, the 35%, is likely front loaded again to that 1 second. So Flame Shield has an incredibly high lucky hit as well. But something like Firewall, 30% lucky hit, that is distributed over 8 seconds. That means you need to wait the full 8 seconds to get that full 30% of lucky hit. It's really low. And I know you're going to be stacking 4 to 5 of these firewalls, maybe even a few more. I get that. But in order to meet the level of lucky hit of, say, Flame Shield or Fireball, you have to do that. It's required. And this is something I noticed when I ran the Abattoir of Zir. Like, I was hard stuck at AOZ 6 or 7 with the Meteor Firewall build. And then as soon as I switched out Firewall for Hydra, I jumped to tier 9 immediately. I'm not saying you can't play Lucky Hit with Firewall. I'm saying that there are probably better ways that you can scale damage. And if you're trying to trigger Lucky Hits, there are better ways to trigger Lucky Hits. So that's kind of why in my previous build, I came out with a Meteor Fireball build that used the Meteor enchantment because, Meteor has a great lucky hit chance. Fireball has an excellent lucky hit chance. And if you're using Gloves of the Illuminator, you're getting like 2 to 3 hits of Fireball per cast of Fireball. And if you have, plus 80% lucky hit, you're talking about Fireball going upwards basically 70% lucky hit. And then you're getting 2 to 3 hits of Fireball per cast. You can cast super fast with Ancient Flame. Throwing Fireball into a group of mobs, you're going to probably trigger 5 to 10 lucky hits immediately. And I saw that when I used the Ball Lightning enchantment, because every time I would cast Fireball, I would summon 2 to 3 Ball Lightnings. So that's why I believe if you're going to use the Meteor enchantment, you're going to need a lot of front-loaded lucky hit or stacking of the Fire Bolt enchantment. This is just my experience. This is what I've seen in my testing. Like I said, I spent the last month in Abattoir of Zir trying these builds out. This is what I believe, and I certainly am willing to be proven wrong. When the gauntlet comes out, we will see what builds succeed and how their speed is and their damage. And so this is my take on the Meteor Firewall. So getting into the skills, we are going to use on your bar, we're going to use Flame Shield, Ice Blades, Teleport, Hydra, Meteor, and Firewall. Now, something that I found when I was testing the Meteor Firewall build and the Meteor Hydra build is that Hydra actually adds a lot of burning damage. And it's not that Hydra does a lot of burning damage, it's that Hydra attacks at such a high rate that it stacks Firebolt enchantment very quickly, and it stacks its own burning effects. So you're actually getting 2 burning effects very, very quickly. And this happens without you doing anything, right? You can summon those 2 Hydras. The Hydras last for 12 seconds, and then you can do whatever you want for 12 seconds. And that's why I knew that if we were using the new Starfall Coronet that gives the Meteor a cooldown, that it, unlike the previous build, if you're using both Hydra and Meteor, since Meteor has a cooldown, you're going to have downtime. These can't be your only 2 skills. So that is why we are actually adding Firewall to become more of a complete burning build. So the difference between this build and the last build is the last build focused on making the Meteor impact damage do as much damage as possible. So if you look at Meteor, actually 70% of Meteor's damage is coming from the initial impact of the Meteor. That's not the burning. About 30% of the damage is coming from Meteor's burning effect. So that's why I thought that scaling the Meteor impact would be a good way to build the new Meteor build. But if you wanted to have more of a burning build that kind of focuses on Firewall and uses Meteor as kind of a supplemental burning ability, that still sounds really good to me. The Starfall Coronet has about 25% lucky hit. That makes it amazing to trigger any lucky hit ability. So the Firewall, Enchantment, and X-Fall. So this is a burning focused build that uses X-Falls and Hydra. And basically your rotation is going to be immediately summon the 2 Hydras, do your 2 Meteors that you'll have saved up, and then fill in with Firewall. And then as you're also casting your abilities, you're going to be triggering the Firewall enchantment with your high lucky hit chance and covering the entire area with burning fire and burninate everything. Now we are using the Fire Bolt enchantment because I feel like with both Meteor and with Hydra, like I said, Fire Bolt and Hydra are actually really, really good for burning damage. I was surprised in my testing how good it was, and I think if we use this and focus on burning, we will actually add a lot of damage. So this is 2 reasons why I'm feeling that these builds are missing Hydra. They're using Inferno, and that's not a bad idea. The only thing is, Firewall doesn't have a crazy high mana cost, not like Meteor or like Ball Lightning, right? So Meteor has a mana cost of 40, Firewall has a mana cost of 30. So it's less, it's actually closer to Fireball. So it's not that much mana compared. And keep in mind, Meteor is free with the Starfall Coronet. So how much mana are we going to need? So with the mana efficiency of Hydra, with the mana efficiency of a free Meteor, and with Firewall's not that high of a mana cost, I don't think we actually need Inferno. Inferno does good damage, but it's on a long cooldown, and we're certainly not running Flicker Step to make it better. And I feel like the main thing that you get from Inferno is the free mana cost that allows for spamming. And being that 2 of our 3 abilities are really, really, really mana efficient, in Meteor's case, not using mana at all, I don't feel like we need the mana from Inferno. So I think that's another miss that I'm seeing online. So getting into the skills, we're going to put 2 into Fire Bolt and then use that as our first enchantment. Then next, we are going to add 1 into Devastation and 3 into Elemental Dominance to scale both Meteor and Firewall. We are going to put 1 point into Flame Shield and then take Teleport all the way to Shimmering Teleport for the damage reduction. 3 points into Glass Cannon, and you'll see that we don't run Ice Armor. We had to drop Ice Armor. And I believe that this is okay because we are, since Meteor is a cooldown, we are going to be getting a barrier with protection from Meteor. So I think it's okay. I think we'll have enough barrier and we'll be able to last with this. And then one into Elemental Attunement. We're a lucky hit based build, so this is going to be triggering a lot. We are going to have 1 point into Hydra and then take it to Summon Hydra for the double burn effect for the Summon Hydra burn and the Firebolt. Guys, I'm telling you, this stacks crazy quickly with the attack speed of Hydra. 3 into Precision Magic, and then 1 into Ice Blades, taking it all the way to Summon Ice Blades. And the other thing I like about running the Fire Bolt enchantment is it makes Ice Blades burn as well. And actually, Ice Blades becomes a decent damage ability because it then can trigger X-Falls, it can trigger all your lucky hits a lot better, and it actually triggers burning for you. It becomes a really good ability. Of course, we're going to go with your defensive suite, Mana Shield, and Protection, and put 3 into Conjuration Mastery because we'll be summoning Hydras and we'll be summoning Ice Blades, so that's like a good 6 to 12% multiplicative damage extra. Max out your Meteor, and then we actually are taking Wizard's Meteor in this build because we needed the points. We needed to save the points in Crippling Flames, so we took Wizard's Meteor, and that's okay because we mostly care about the burning effect of Meteor and not so much of the impact damage in this build. So the impact is not going to matter as much in this build. We mostly care about the burning effect that the Meteor is creating. Of course, then add 3 into Inner Flames and 3 into Devouring Blaze. Devouring Blaze is mostly in this build for Meteor a little bit, but also because of X-Falls. When X Falls crits, we want that to hit as hard as possible. Max out Firewall and take it all the way to Mage's Firewall. This helps the usability of Firewall. They don't need to be standing in it, and they're going to continue to burn when they leave it, which will happen a lot. You could go to Wizard's Firewall for the mana, and I will definitely test that out, but I don't think we'll need the mana. And then the ultimate skills are very light in this build. We are only taking Endless Pyre for the stacking burning effect. Now, for your ultimate skill, you're going to take Combustion because we are actually stacking very many different types of burning effects. We have Hydra, Meteor, Meteorites, Firebolt, and Firewall. That's 5 burning effects. That's an extra 10% multiplicative damage added on to Combustion. The only thing that we're missing in this build is Inferno and Incinerate. Now, moving on to your gear, of course your helmet is going to be the Starfall Coronet. This makes Meteor extremely mana efficient and just a very great damage skill and lucky hit trigger. The main thing that you're getting from this helmet is the 25% lucky hit, which just makes it so great in an X-Falls build, which this is. We are going for a classic damage reduction chest with a twist because, again, this is a burning-based build, and the Burning Instinct legendary node actually scales with your intelligence, and it scales quite well. You get an extra 1% multiplicative damage for every 25 intelligence. That's crazy. So adding an extra 63 intelligence here, I think we can get away with it. Of course, we'll need to test out like survivability and things like that. But I really wanted to maximize my intelligence level and maximize that Burning Instinct legendary node in this burning build. So I thought anywhere we could squeak in some intelligence, we were going to take it. And you'll see that with the gloves as well. The gloves, we are running intelligence, critical strike chance for X-Falls. The fire damage over time, again, this is a fire-based build. And then lucky hit chance for X-Falls and for the Firewall enchantment. Now, alternatively, you could run attack speed on these gloves. Like, you could take out the fire damage over time. I think that's an option. You definitely could do that. I'm going to have to test out them both. I think they're both fine options. But because we have a lack of mana in this build, we're not running Inferno that really promotes that spam. I wanted my abilities just to hit harder to make everything more mana efficient. And for the aspect on the gloves, we are running Meteorites. Meteorites actually do a lot of burning damage. Now, I'm assuming that the burning damage effect is staying. Here, it says that the Meteorite damage has been changed to 20 to 30% of the casted meteor's damage. I don't know how this is going to be. I don't know if they just mean the initial impact of meteorites does 20 to 30% of the meteor's damage, and then it still is burning over time. If it doesn't have a burning effect, then obviously we are going to drop the meteorites from this build, but it really depends. If it does have a burning effect, I don't see a reason for us not to run meteorites. It gives us an extra burning effect for combustion. And then likewise, as I mentioned in my previous video, you are dropping 12 to 18 meteorites per cast of meteor. So that is a lot of stacking burning. So if the burning effect is removed from meteorites, simple change here then, we'll just simply change this aspect to Storm Swell to add a overall multiplicative damage just to everything. So for your pants, of course, we are running to Bolt's Will. This is going to give us a little bit of mana in order to allow us to Firewall spam. Now, this is going to be pretty easy for you. You will start the fight out by double casting Hydra, cast your Meteor twice, then Firewall to 0 mana, hit one of your unstoppable skills. You'll pretty much shoot to full mana again. By that time, Meteor will be back off of cooldown. You can cast another Meteor, and then Firewall spam again to 0 mana, and then by that time, chances are you'll have another unstoppable skill to shoot your mana up to full again. With Tibalt's Will, I think that this is really the only mana item we need to succeed with this build. Plus, it gives you a 40% multiplicative damage to all your burning effects and, most important, X-Falls. There is another option for your pants that I'm showing here. I would recommend going ranks of Firewall because I believe that Firewall will be the bulk of this this build's burning damage versus putting Ranks of Meteor on here and then going with triple damage reduction, and then I would move Disobedience from the chest to the pants, and then add Exploiters to the chest. And then, of course, Exploiters is going to help us give us 40% extra multiplicative damage on everything. Burning, X-Falls, whenever anything is unstoppable. So I know how rare Tibalt's Will is, so this is an option for you to use if you don't have a Tibalt's Will yet. Now for the boots, there's a little bit, I'm not sure which one's actually best here. I'm kind of kicking around. Esu's Heirloom is very, very strong. My struggle with Esu's Heirloom in this build is I believe that more than 50% of the damage of the build is going to come from burning effects. I believe it may be even close to 60 or 70% of this build's damage is coming from burning. So I'm not sure that Esu's Heirloom is actually adding a lot of damage to the build. I actually think it may be better to go with a legendary boot and then get that 90 intelligence on there, get the movement speed, ranks of flame shield, and then allow us to use the aspect of fortune. I'm going to test this out though, because Esu's Heirloom is really good with X-Falls, but again, I'm not sure. We're not really scaling the meteor impact damage in this build that much. You know, X-Falls is the only thing that's going to benefit from Esu's Heirloom, and I don't know how high X-Falls damage, like the raw damage of X-Falls, is going to add to the build. So my first thought is that these normal legendary boots with the 90 intelligence are going to be superior, but we'll have to test out both to see. And of course, in the build, we are using a wand focus because this is a lucky hit based build around X-Falls. For your wand, you're going to have intelligence, all stats, damage to burning enemies. I felt was good just because I don't know how high the uptime on vulnerability is going to be with the construct. Most people I see are saying it's going to be great uptime. We don't know that, and if that is the case, then certainly switch out damage to burning enemies for vulnerable damage. But for now, I'm having damage to vulnerable on there, assuming there's some lack of uptime of vulnerable. And then, of course, mastery skill damage to scale Firewall and Meteor. And then your aspect you have on your wand is Conceited. That just helps us with the raw damage of all of our burning and of X-Falls. On your focus, you are going to use just a normal focus with intelligence, lucky hit, damage reduction from burning, and critical strike chance. You could switch out the damage reduction from burning for another cooldown reduction roll, but I felt like we didn't need the cooldown reduction because it's only really helping Meteor and our defensive skills a little bit. So I felt like we might need the extra damage reduction because we swapped out that extra intelligence roll on the chest. So I felt like an extra damage reduction roll would be better here versus having the cooldown reduction. And then, of course, we have the critical strike chance just to scale X-Fall. For your aspect, you are having the Serpentine aspect for an additional Hydra. I'm telling you, this adds a ton of burning damage, a ton of lucky hit. If you haven't seen my lucky hit X-Falls video, where I basically determined that Hydra stacking the Firebolt enchantment has one of the top lucky hit chances for burning, for triggering X-Falls, this is going to be huge for us, and it's going to add a lot of burning damage. For your amulet, I'm not seeing anyone use the Engulfing Flames on their amulet, or just in any builds in general, and I have no idea why. This puzzled me, because in a Firewall build, this is increasing your damage massively. And if you think about it, if you think about the way you're going to play the build, right? The first thing you're going to do is double cast Meteor on a mob, right? So you're going to have a lot of damage immediately, getting them to 50% health. So your most damage is going to be that burst damage that you do when you go Meteor, Hydra, Meteor, Firewall. And, a lot of your damage is at the beginning of the fight, getting them to that 50% of HP. So this is going to trigger as soon as our Meteor is on cooldown, and, we're sitting there and we're just spamming Firewall at that point. Well, this is when this is going to matter the most. Engulfing Flame, it's going to be huge. I think it's going to be great on the amulet. It's going to be a lot of damage. So then for the stats on the amulet, again, we're not running cooldown reduction because this is a burning base build. I wanted to scale our burning damage with that plus intelligence, and that's huge. You can see over here, my intelligence is almost 1300. that is going to be a ton of multiplicative damage on Burning Instinct. So I wanted to scale it even more by adding that plus 11% intelligence on my amulet. Going to be huge for your damage. Plus 3 ranks of mastery for Meteor and Firewall. Plus 3 endless pyre to scale burning damage. And then total armor, because we're going to need the armor roll since we are using Tybalt's Will. Then for your rings are kind of locked in. You're going to use Talrashas. And remember that shadow damage and the poison damage from your construct. And you can see I'm also not running Raiment in this build either. I see a lot of other people running Raiment, and I don't think that's a bad idea. But I think that we can use the gripping portion of the construct to do those pull-ins for us. So I think we can get away with that. We'll have to see and test it out. Then, of course, we're running X-Falls. We have a lot of lucky hit in this build. We're having a ton of lucky hit from Hydra, a ton of lucky hit from Meteor. This is going to be triggering a lot, so we'll be able to see that damage. Now, moving on to the Paragon board, we managed to fit in 6 boards and 3 legendary nodes, so very similar to the previous build that I released. So coming into your starter board, you're going to start out by coming in on the side. Non-physical damage is probably one of the best stats in this whole build because it literally scales everything. It scales all of your burning effects, damage over time. It scales X-Falls excellently. It likewise scales Frigid Fate and also the Elemental Summoner Legendary node very, very well. So non-physical damage is amazing for this build. Want to grab it whenever we can. And of course, we are going to throw in the Elementalist glyph here. Again, cold damage from Ice Blades, lightning damage from Teleport, and you're doing 15% multiplicative. And then of course the extra non-physical damage is great. So moving up into our Burning Instinct board, this is where I put Tactician. Again, this helps us scale the damage reduction and damage to burning enemies. Really great for your defense, as well as giving you 10% multiplicative damage. And we are actually grabbing both the Safeguard node for that armor and damage reduction from elites, and likewise as well damage to burning enemies and damage to elites. And then you're going to come through and grab your Burning Instinct node. Now this is getting a massive buff. It says 75 intelligence and it says 41%, but this is actually jumping. This is going to actually jump to close to 80% multiplicative damage as soon as the patch goes through, because this is only going to require 25 intelligence. So it's going to be crazy. It's almost doubling the power of this legendary node. So that's kind of what the point of this build was, just to maximize this node. Now that we're done with Burning Instinct, we're going to come up to your Heart, your Enchantment Master node, which is going to have the Reinforced Glyph to increase our non-physical damage as well as resist all and give us more damage reduction when we have a barrier. And also grab this non-physical damage and damage to elites up here. And come out of here and come through and go to your Elemental Summoner board. Now the Elemental Summoner board, I'm actually grabbing the Elemental Summoner node because we do have 3 enchantments. We do have 3 conjurations. The cooldown reduction is actually really nice on Ice Blades because it will help you cast multiple Ice Blades very easily. That's really nice. The mana cost reduction on Hydra is neither here nor there, but the multiplicative bonus damage that the summons are getting is actually increasing from 3% to 5%. So this is actually going to be close over 50% multiplicative damage from this node. So I'm not sure if this is going to stay. I at least want to test it out to see how much damage it's adding. So it's in here for now. And of course, you'll also grab your Keeper of Elements for extra non-physical damage. Come through and then plug your Enchanter glyph. Now, right now, I have Enchanter in here because there's just so much intelligence that we can easily grab in the Elemental Summoner board. You can see there I have 60 intelligence, and this is 60 intelligence for me just going through, right? So, like, I'm just going up to the node here. I'm just leaving the board down here. Like, I'm not trying to get a boatload of intelligence. It's super easy for you to do. And then adding 80% non-physical damage, that is an 8% multiplier on Frigid Fate, and then an additional damage on the Elemental Summoner as well. So that's huge. And keep in mind, non-physical damage scales everything. Plus, it's always good to be immune to fire damage, right? After your Elemental Summoner board, you're going to come down to Frigid Fate,
and then you're going to grab the guarded as you come through, and then grab the advantage for the extra lucky hit. Really good there. Grab your Frigid Fate, which is capped out. Wonderful to see that. It's been a while since I've been able to actually cap this out on builds, like non-cold damage builds, right? It's pretty hard to do, to cap it out like that. But then come through, and I do like throwing Adept in here for the increased size on Meteor and Firewall, scaling our Meteor and Firewall damage, so that is great. Then come through and come into our last board, which is your Ceaseless Conduit board that we're throwing Destruction in. And of course, Destruction is in here because 10% of your critical strike damage is added to Burning Instinct as multiplicative damage. So this is 200% crit. That is adding an extra 20% multiplicative damage to Burning Instinct. And then likewise, it is also amazingly scaling X-Falls for you. So this is double bang for your buck. Putting the Destruction Glyph in here is double bang for your buck. You're scaling all your burning amazingly. You're also scaling X-Falls great. So that's it for your build. I'm not going to spend time trying to theory craft what is the best construct abilities. I see some builds online doing that. I don't see a point to do that until we actually use the abilities, because everything could change with just the simple usability of those abilities. You can't just read a skill and know how it works. So I'm not going to waste my time and waste your time theory crafting those until we actually get in there and use them. So please hit a like if you like this video. Please hit subscribe for all the best Diablo 4 content and guides. And as always, turn your dial to Random Number Gaming for weekly updates on Diablo 4.